Hi, my name is Kendall W OW. This is my first year in ISM, and I'm studying creative entrepreneurship. So, creative entrepreneurship is art as it has to deal with any of the, or business as it has to deal with any of the creative industries, and they fall into 4 categories: heritage arts, media, functional creations, and they cover basically anything from your museums to galleries to printed media, or even like design consultants and design studios. And some of my first I'll just go over my interviews. One of my first ones was with Diana Pollack, and she's the director of the Creative Arts Center of Dallas. And the Creative Arts Center of Dallas is one of a growing trend of culture centers or community centers, and they cover a wide range of services. They have an exhibition space. They offer services and training to artists, as well as casual classes for like hobbyists and people who just enjoy art but aren't necessarily professional in it. And what I learned from her was professionalism. She'd come from a background as she had her own consulting firm in communications, and she'd use the network that she built doing that to get directorial positions in various nonprofits, and then she brought that experience to the Creative Arts Center. And so she already knew how to make her own press kits, how to get coverage, how to run a professional organization. And that's something that isn't terribly common in the creative industries. So I really took that to heart. My next one was with Brenda Thomas. She's the president of the Visual Arts Guild of Frisco, and she taught me about some concerns of a less established scene. Obviously, Dallas has much more developed art infrastructure than Frisco. We have the Discovery Center, which technically has an exhibition hall, but no one really thinks of that as a place you go to see art or to do art. And she's someone who's really trying to build Frisco's reputation as an artistic community. And she taught me about how difficult it was to acquire space, especially on a limited budget. Local governments, they really only respond to the most vocal, the people who are representing the most vocal concerns, or they're representing their concerns the most vocally. So she has developers coming to her, they have developers coming to them asking for space, willing to pay taxes, willing to provide revenue to the city for expansion. And the benefits of arts and an arts center are less tangible. So she taught me how that's sometimes difficult to convey. And then it's also hard if you're a less established community to even draw in talent and to draw in artists who would just as easily flock to New York or LA or Glasgow or Paris or somewhere with a really solid arts community where they know that if they're talented they can find success, as opposed to having to build up a community where they came from. And my mentor now is Miss Paula Harris. She's the marketing director of the Kettle Art Gallery, which is downtown. And her background is similar to mine, where she lived in the suburbs and she was really interested in art, and so she started getting involved, I guess, through just attending events and talking to people. And then she started doing work with community organizations and with gallery owners themselves, just helping out on projects. And then it got to the point where the owner of Kettle, he was like, I really need to be paying you for this. So she kind of walked into her position, and that really connected with me, someone who's coming from a suburb as well, and I guess more of an outsider. And she really taught me about the value of a network, and you can have skills, and skills are really valuable, especially professional skills. But if you're in the culture industries, there's gonna be such a wide variety of things demanded from you that it's far more valuable to know people who can teach you how to do what you need to do, and to know people who can help you get accomplished what you're trying to accomplish. And some of my research was on regional variation, funding and profitability, modernization, and clustering. These are, I guess, the biggest trends or biggest focuses I found in the culture industries as of late. And regional variation is a really big thing. As the world has become more industrialized, people get more access to internet, you're starting to see less of distinct artist or culture within your local communities, because you can go online and see what's happening in New York, what's happening in LA. Of course, there's a gallery. You might not necessarily be able to be there, but people are more apt to travel. People are more apt to experience digitally, and so really having a thriving community and a thriving art scene locally is something that's becoming increasingly difficult. And one of the main difficulties is profitability. Businesses have to make money. To survive, they have to make money. Museums have to make money. Galleries have to make money. And like galleries make their money off of selling pieces. Museums make it off of admissions. And these are they're becoming harder and harder to get because you have free sources from the internet. You can just look at art online. You don't have to necessarily go to a museum or buy from a gallery. And so alternate funding and alternate cash flow options are being explored. And modernization, we're starting to see as these alternate funding methods are being explored that maybe the most sustainable way to have arts community isn't centered around a museum and having big exhibits that cost a whole lot of money to promote and to run and to even keep the building open. Maybe we just need a small space and everyone who wants to see it can see it then, and then they'll tell their friends, and then we'll build up to a bigger space. And maybe it can start from the ground up instead of asking the government for a big charter or a big commission, and that's becoming ever more popular. And then clustering is one thing that's really, really common in the culture industries. As more research is being done, we're starting to see that where you get art that transforms into something that's a really regional or regionally known is from a small little cluster, maybe a couple streets, a few institutions, because they can feed off of each other, and you really see innovation at a rate that you won't if everything's just spread out. And my original work is it's on display in my portfolio. It's a 6-page document, and I found that it was a really it was a unique process, because not only did I have to find the answers as in a typical assignment, I had to find out what was the question and then how do I write the question. So it began to be like an onion. I thought I knew what I wanted to do, and then I peeled away that layer and found more, and peeled away that layer and found more and more. And I learned that it's also a tentative process. My learning isn't just done. I haven't just finished it. I'm constantly adding on, talking to more people, discussing new things with my mentor, and adding, even though the document's already done, I'm still adding on to that learning that I started with the document. And it was also served as a survey for me. In some professions, such as medicine, there's a doctor, a nurse, you might have a physician or an assistant, and certain positions that are laid out. In the culture industries, it's less defined what there is to do and where the work can be done and what the need is. And so preparing my original work really helped me see that. And one of the first thing I did was I had to develop a process. And this actually turned out to be really similar to how a professional organization or a government would go about doing a culture inventory and analysis. First, you start out with research, you identify your needs, and then you craft your recommendations. So for research, I started with my interviews and looked at what are the important institutions in Dallas. What are the important organizations? Where are the trends leading? Where are we seeing growth instead of decay? And then I focused on what could be done to benefit this, and what does this institution need to get a bigger audience? What do they need to be open more days to have more artists coming to them? What do the artists need to put out work that's more apt to today's trends? And then I wrote my recommendations, which I'll discuss. And so I guess the first part of the research is your assets. You looked at what institutions are there, what initiatives are happening, and then a really big thing, this isn't so representative of culture industry universally, but in Dallas is publications. Institutions, I found there's, you have your nonprofit institutions, you have your traditional institutions, which would be like a museum, then you have your individual institutions, which are like the galleries. They're not really tied to a bigger network or tied to a government. They're just motivated people who are deciding they want to do something and they want to show their work, and they really need a platform to do that, and they go about establishing that platform. And then initiatives, these are like one-off events. They're the closest to your individual institutions. There's a certain creatives, they'll have an idea that's so grandiose they can't even find an institution that can help with what they want, and then they'll just go about instituting it on their own. And one of these initiatives is Aurora Dallas. It happened last year, I believe. It was a pretty big citywide project. It started to get the city of Dallas, like the entity, involved just because of its scale. It was between a whole lot of galleries, a bunch of individual artists. They were really focused on innovation and what is art and what can we perform and still call this art, what new media can we make art out of. And it was all like from the ground up. It was two people who really wanted to do something cool, and they wanted to show off their work, and they wanted to show Dallas, or exhibit Dallas as a culture center, and they just started, and it ballooned from there. And then publications, there's a lot of traditional publications such as the Dallas Observer and Dallas Morning News, which have print media, but online media is starting to become really, really important in shaping in capturing the attention of your market. And so blogs, basically, they determine what is going to be successful. If they cover your event, you'll have so many more people showing up, and they won't just show up to that event. Now they'll be interested in art more than they were before, and they might buy pieces, they might follow artists, they might come to shows at other galleries. And so attracting the attention of publications is of paramount importance, or of utmost importance. And then planning. So obviously when you plan, or when you undergo any endeavor, it's best to plan first. And so I was looking for what planning has Dallas done in respect to culture. And we have office of the OCA, which is Office of Cultural Affairs, and they came out with a culture plan in 2002, which that kind of surprised me, because the 2000s are about when culture planning started to become a serious concern to governments. But it really took off in Europe before it hit stateside, and Dallas really is just starting to really become distinctive as a third coast, as opposed to like New York and like LA, San Francisco, the California areas. So I didn't think we would have a plan that dated back to 2002. And in fact, it was only a 10-year draft. It was only supposed to go to 2012. And so far, I haven't seen a revised plan. So I'm in the process of figuring out what plan are we abiding by now. But yeah, it was a 2002 plan. It spelled out all the initiatives that were going to be done, under the branch of the OCA, what their goals were, what they wanted to see happen to Dallas in respects to the art scenes. And they cover their three main goals were facilities, programs, and collaborations. They run a whole lot of facilities. Most of them are culture centers, like the Bathhouse Culture Center, and they have one in Lakewood, and I think there's 26 total, and the Majestic Theater. There's also historic buildings in there. And then programs, they run a community radio station, a lot of education initiatives, and then the most interesting to me was they have a lot of contracts and a lot of commissions that they give out, and you can apply for those. And that really gives a means to artists and creatives who want to create and want to make something, but they don't necessarily have the capital or the resources now. They can go through the OCA. But I guess one downside I found is not that many people are utilizing it, not that many artists or creatives know about it, and this might be more on the fault of the artist because stereotypically they kind of oppose, I guess, regulations and oppose going through formal processes as opposed to just creating. And then collaborations is their goal to address that need. There's a lot of institutions and a lot of artists and creatives who they aren't necessarily aware how important development is and how important being awareness is, and they just want to go and do their own thing, but they could be doing so much more if they would just come together and collaborate and have a united front. And that's what the OCA is trying to establish with their third goal. And they identified some groups and needs, and the groups were artists and organizations affiliated with the OCA, artists and organizations not affiliated with the OCA, and then just interested people who were like culture consumers. And most of the needs referred back to not having the organization and communication. And then Dallas is a really spread out city as opposed to like New York or Boston or some older cities, especially in Europe, where just walking around you would see what's happening, you would be aware of things going on in your city. In Dallas, you can live either in a suburb or even directly in Dallas and not have any idea what's going on in your same county or in your same city because you're set apart by so many miles. People in Dallas drive around, and when you drive, you go to a destination and then you go home. You don't walk on the way there and walk on the way back, so there's a lot of publicity that is lost through that. And so that's a big need that's being addressed. And then I also referred to some existing models because that plan was drafted in 2002, and obviously Dallas isn't like a culture mecca. And so I looked to the two primary plans that I referred to were Austin and Urbact. And Urbact is it's a separate entity that was established and is, I think, only funded by the United Nations, and they deal with culture or heritage preservation and cultural development throughout all of Europe. And what I learned, there were some specific goals that I learned from those, or some specific, benchmarks that I learned from these two plans that I feel are really applicable to Dallas. All of them had done really exhaustive studies. Austin they pinpointed like 34 goals, and Urbact has like 600 and something initiatives, which is like pretty amazing. And they also have a lot of presentations. They do a lot about promotion. They understand how important that is. So I pulled some of their points from their publications. And from Austin, I really learned that a focused public will building and public awareness campaign that would do Dallas pretty well, because Austin is known to be the musical capital of at least the United States. Some people would say the world. And they still feel like they have things that are going on that really need publicity and that people don't know about. And so if you apply that initiative to a place like Dallas, I feel like it would serve even a greater good. And then encourage a neighborhood-based cultural development and activity. One thing about Dallas is it's really spread out, it's really segmented, but each neighborhood or each segment seems to have its own identity, and I feel like that could really be a big benefit that we could exploit more. And develop affordable and accessible cultural spaces of all types, as I expressed when I was talking about the Frisco Visual Arts Association. And our spaces like a really important thing that artists need to show off their work. They need spaces to exhibit, they need spaces to work, they need spaces to store their materials, and space is pretty expensive. Texas is having a really booming real estate market, and while that's good for development overall, it makes it even harder for artists to get space. And so if you could have the city or a local government who owns the space before it's sold just delineate some of that to cultural development, it would be a really big boon. And we're seeing developers bring in artists. This is happening in the Cedars and Lakewood, Bishop Arts District, the Arts District of Dallas, like the whole complex. That's the biggest continuous arts district in the world. And that's bringing in a lot of money, that's bringing in a lot of attention to Dallas. And so we're starting to see that done, but if it was done in every neighborhood and every community, that would really set Dallas apart from a lot of places in the world and really make them distinct. And then my conclusions and my next steps. I've concluded that community centers are pretty much the way of the future. They should be implemented in more communities. People as a whole are less connected to their communities. Like, a lot of people these days might not even know their neighbors, or if they do, only like cursorily. And so community centers are really, they're places where you can come together and form that bond and form that identity that is really important to, it's really important to people, but especially it's being seen as a really desirable place for millennials and people who are just entering the workforce. And you really want to attract the best talent and the best innovation and the best human capital you can. And so community centers would really help that. And then I'm planning to reach out to organizations like the OCA and DECA, which is the Deep Ellum Community Association, to see what initiative they're starting and what direction they're heading in, because those are really the catalysts for culture. And then attend initiatives and events. These are like the primary sources. One of the things I found in my research was when a city would try to plan for cultural development and economic development, they weren't necessarily aware of their resources and their assets, and that these institutions and events and basically what's happening, that's where you learn that and become better informed. And my quote is, wake up, flex your muscles, God. And it's from Isaiah 51:9. And this quote really inspires me, especially when I'm feeling like I'm not at my best or not the most confident, to look at what I've done and what is being done, and to know that you can and you have the ability and everything is possible. You just have to do it. And that's it.